Abraxas.
Hello, Levinka. Pardon me, madame, but I must take your seat so you can be over here commiserating with the goddess forces. Ho, 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 ho. What do you think of that?
Wow.
Levinka is now in the place of power,
Yeah.
soaking up the energy of the goddess. Wonderful psychic vibrations are coming from this mysterious purple mask, you see.
Yeah.
Okay. Here we see the famous 99 names of Allah, which is a multiplicity of cubes arranged in a suspiciously geometric shape, which correlates to a type of cosmic jewel, because we can see normally the cosmic jewel inside the homuncular house is this, you see. This, which has sacred magical connections, which we can't even begin to talk about. Anointed by the goddess for mysterious purposes, this jewel. But the principle of the jewel, we must remember, is key in alchemy and also in Zelazny, because what you're talking about here for the individual, the magical practice, is that the jewel, which is actually 7 triangles, is a concentration of the 7 cosmic forces. And that by magically controlling and focusing your will through the jewel, it becomes an extension of your will, and it is the eye, the cosmic eye, which your power emanates from, 4-dimensionally speaking. And this big structure here, Allah, is a kind of higher level concept of, whereas humans, inside their individual cube pyramid relationships, we have one of these type of gem jewels. Allah is actually composed of a much larger yet strikingly similar double triangle phenomenon, but it's a pyramid, double pyramid. Why? Because if God is represented by the pyramidal shape of our homuncular house, and Allah is a God that is beyond opposites and represents the infinity in both directions, of course it's a double pyramid made up of the 99 names inside the homuncular house. So I have captured God, and I'm keeping Allah, he's my guest, let's say. He's not a captive, but he's my guest inside the homuncular house. And that means that at this level of my magical existence, I'm achieving that for myself. So instead of the previous Mickey Mouse figure version of my homunculus, now perhaps I'm talking about developing a new God homunculus, which instead of a humanoid type figure interacting with the gnomes, would be me as the Allah Godhead, 5-dimensional, with this 99 cubed 4-dimensional eye as my body, in the same way that the homunculus I use now is my surrogate body in the world of the gnomes. But anyway, these mysterious concepts I'm uttering here are all relevant to general and tremendously significant Platonic concepts. Because the whole world of ideas with a capital I is one of the 5 contributions that the legendary Plato left to us. And as Nietzsche said so famously, everything is a footnote to Plato. Everything in the Western world, or the modern world, let's say. And why is that? Because right at the transition point between Aries and Pisces, Plato pops up as a Illuminati type figure who, right on cue, does what I'm doing now, which is defines the essential hyperspatial and mytho-historical and quasi godlike perception levels that are inherent to the human being, and which are our, let's say, our five elementary powers, let's say. The powers that we have. These five things are five different powers. They're also five different contributions which have structured Western thought in particular and the modern world specifically, right down to the details of the computer age and virtual reality, etc. Okay? If we look closely at these five different elements, we see that, in fact, Plato's essential concepts are the matrix analogy. Not only that, but they are also an inherent evolutionary strategy that you as a Neo figure would employ in relation to the apocalyptic age, believe it or not. Why? Because again, Plato is popping up according to the timetable dictated by the calendar of light, which is, again, the 6,000-year calendar leading up to the year 2000, which the Freemasons use. And it begins in the year 4000 BC with the explosion of the star. Vela 9 is the name of the star. And for a year, in 6000 BC, there was no night. There was a second sun, a star in the sky. And this is also associated with the Sirius intelligence. Why? Because the Sirius aliens probably blew up the star Vela 9 at this time, according to a timetable which relates to humanity and their manipulations of us in our evolutionary scheme. Because we must remember that the Sirius five-pointed star in the Freemasonry lodges is the extraterrestrial Sirius intelligence. The all-seeing eye of Freemasonry, that represents the collective consciousness of the planet, which is in mystical communion with the star. So the calendar of light properly represents an alignment, let's say, of the perception field of the all-seeing eye. An alignment conducted by the Sirius intelligence conspiratorially through all these groups going back to the ancient Isis cult 4,000 years ago. And this cult is the same cult that Plato and his mentor's mentor, Solon, more importantly, was a member of. It's the whole idea of the serious conspiratorial manipulations of history now. But it has a more interesting dimension in that it plays directly into an apocalyptic scheme that the Sirius aliens have kind of slipped into the whole apocalyptic game. Kind of as an aside, and it's been totally missed by either side, because most people playing the apocalyptic game are playing for either the red or blue team, either order or chaos. They are perceiving themselves as being the light against the dark, either side, of course, in that convenient blame the enemy way. And so they've totally missed this other whole matrix of symbolism, which is at the hyperspatial core of humanity's evolutionary anatomy. The 4 or 5 dimensional anatomy structure. Plato was given this information by the Egyptian initiates, and he implanted it in our whole history, Western history, because Plato's concepts were adapted by the Greek culture, of course, then of course the Alexander the Great culture, which is based on that, then the first New World Order international Hellenic culture, which resulted, and then leading up to the Greco-Roman Empire, etc. So Christianity in particular, once Christianity comes on the scene, a few hundred years after Plato's death, after Plato creates the Academy of Platonists, who are these mysterious conspiratorial characters who are the intellectual elite tutoring all of the rulers of the day. Plato's biggest student, Aristotle, tutors Alexander the Great. And they set up this whole chain reaction of a New World Order consciousness, let's say, which possibly was intended to unify the world at a New World Order level back then, according to the Calendar of Light scheme. However, there was a stumbling that occurred and things went awry, perhaps. Or, perhaps not, let's say maybe the Alexander Hellenic era, which goes back directly to Plato, is actually a seeding intended to define the promise of the age of Pisces at the beginning. And then there's the two-fish dichotomy that goes on for the 2,000-year period, ending in the resolution of it, where that promise is now fulfilled. A new world order of global harmony that serves the planetary brain agenda of Isis and the Syrians. Okay, so the Freemasonry characters, anyway. We have to remember that the space god flyby occurs at the same time as this Vela 9 explosion. And the Year of Light, which was also in ancient Sumer, because it's the same latitude essentially as Egypt, they also record the Year of Light. And to them, it's tied up in their Nibiru, Anunnaki, blah, 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 12 planet type plot level. That this was one of the signs of the cosmic beings. Why? Because the space gods didn't land in Egypt at that time. They landed in Sumer, in their flyby, conducted whatever business they were conducting, made sure the program's adjusted, then handed off the program to their conspirator, let's say, because we got to remember, here it is, very complex. And it's surprising that the topic of Plato would lead back right to the serious concepts, but it does. It's really not that surprising. The idea is that the space gods, when they are still Illuminati alchemists of the year 25,000 years from now, let's say 10 years before they become the gods, it's their contact with the Syrians that gives them the clue about the archive on Mars, where they will find the plans to become the space gods. And it's another example of these serious manipulations of history. And the serious collaboration with the space gods is necessary from the space god point of view, because they are responsible for engineering the plan that will be human history in that 26,000 year loop leading up to our apocalyptic age. And so, in order to accomplish that responsibility, yet still train themselves simultaneously for their duties, which will be on the galactic stage, okay, they need the help of the serious intelligences to kind of babysit the Earth and put into place a lot of the things, because the space gods are actually only on Earth for 3 zodiac ages. The 26,000 years ago age of Aquarius, the Genesis point, leading up to Capricorn, then into what's next? After Capricorn, Sagittarius, and then leading up to so they leave at the end of Sagittarius, beginning of Scorpio. That's when the space gods leave the Earth, and they travel hyperdimensionally across the island of the dead to the center, over the mountaintop where all the monotheistic gods exist, get their final boost and final blessing, let's say, from humanity's spiritual authorities, and then they're off, bang, and they re-enter linear time briefly on the other side of the clock, and they pass by Sumer, are recorded in their landing interaction with the ancient Sumerians, and there they plant the final adjustments and elements of the program, which is going to play out with a monotheistic tribal god matrix that is unleashed on every culture and manipulates their whole social structure according to the apocalyptic design of the age of, from Taurus to Aries to Pisces. All that is a very tight playing out of the final stages of the loop. And so they give that plan off to the Syrians, and the beginning of the plan's implementation of the final countdown is actually 6,000 years. Of the 26,000 year cycle, approximately 6,000 years is the last countdown, and the space gods leave on their way to the greater galaxy, and they leave Earth in the care of the Sirius intelligences and their cult of neo-conspirators, who are led possibly by a few surviving Atlantean immortals, right, for the beings of light, or beings who interbred. This is the whole also where you see the elite ancient cults who are interbreeding with the gods conspiracy. Possibilities that they're half human, half Syrian, half Orion conspirator supermen, and women. Probably women who have interbred with the Sirius aliens. And so anyway, these characters are the creators of the initial Isis cult, which begins the original calendar of light tabulation, you see. In the calendar of light, which is recorded isomorphically in the Great Pyramid's ascending corridor into the King's Chamber, the whole Richard Noon 552,000 plot of the Great Pyramid's line, which ironically is like a line leading up. Some Hobbit feet fascination there? To give you some twirling. The line is leading up to the top of the tower, the pyramid, let's say, but through the inside into its core. So that line of history is the calendar of light, is the final conspiracy, which is playing out now in its last stages. It begins and ends in ancient Sumer, you see. Even though it's recorded by the Egyptian cult, and they are the ones who are ultimately puppeteering it, it also takes place primarily in what is now Iraq, ancient Babylon's, where it begins, and then it ends now in Iraq with the New World Order. See, at that time, this is how it is. The Egyptian culture, again, is Atlantean leftover. We must remember that Atlantis is the New World Order level of civilization. It's the level we're at now. More advanced because they had their act together from the beginning, thanks to the handoff presence of the space gods giving them all their wonderful technology at the start. And so the Atlantean supermen, Numenorians, let's say, they have a level of civilization equal to a New World Order, so they are the first to switch on the planetary brain and really capture the eye and look through it and direct it, you know? And they blow it. Their puzzle falls into the sea, into pieces. And now, humanity's in chaos from their fall, which is number 6, Leo, all the way up to Taurus. The Conan period, the Lord of the Rings play-out period, where all those elements of the first half of the 26,000 year loop are vanished, swept off the board, leaving humanity in charge, quote-unquote, of the planet for the final quarter of the cycle. And so all of human history rightly is perceived as beginning around the year 4000 BC in a standard historical timeline, because that's when human history, recorded and supposedly in charge of by humans, begins. However, of course, it's all manipulated from behind the scenes by the Sirius Atlantean leftovers who are based in Egypt and who have survived, possibly by going into underground Great Pyramid, Sphinx chambers, who knows what. Insert whatever under the pyramid's plot level suits your needs, okay? But they have the archive, they are the archive. Maybe it's an artificial intelligence thing. Perhaps they're a Borg-type half-human, half-machine. And like in Stargate, listen to this, in Stargate, the animal-headed Egyptian deities are revealed to be the result of aliens who are essentially humanoid wearing weird armor that has the huge jackal head or whatever. What if that is actually part of a god impersonation scheme that these Atlanteans are pulling off, and that they're actually kind of quasi-technological supermen, but because they're all cool and Atlantean, they have it all elegantly designed so it appears to be like a mythological beast instead of a suit of armor, let's say. And maybe there's some kind of, you know, back engineering of this Atlantean technology going on with the New World Order government of the Anglo-American Empire. See, that's interesting. People, when they talk about Area 51, supposedly back engineering saucers crashed from Zeta Reticuli, why don't they think about back engineering Atlantean artifacts? Because they don't have all the concepts in the same context, and so they have no idea. But the more likely scenario, anyway, is that right from the beginning of the Space God flyby, when they finally leave, their liftoff, let's say, at the beginning of the Age of Taurus, when the calendar of light occurs, it's probable, and there's no better explanation, it's probable that the Vela 9 explosion, which was kind of detonated by the Syrians, could be related to the fact that the space gods at that moment are launching from Earth. They launch from Earth, let's say, in a timetable related to this explosion, and the year of light corresponds to the afterburn of their launch as they head perhaps towards this Vela 9. What if Vela 9 in its orientation in the sky, which curiously enough points out past the Taurus constellation, what if the Syrians blow up this star and it becomes like a booster rocket, let's say, for the space gods launching from Earth to home in on, be drawn to and kind of slingshotted up the Orion Arm and into the greater galaxy? That makes perfect sense if you think about some kind of solar system intergalactic, hyperspace sluice gate, let's say, that the Syrians have mastered, this hyperspace warping that would allow humans to launch, the space god, metahumans, to launch from Earth, and in their vast ship somehow, through the Vela 9 explosion, harnessing the energy of that, propel themselves on their mission to the galactic center, which, by the way, was what the Syrians told Timothy Leary and his cult when they were locked up in isolation in Folsom Prison, that humans were going to return to the center of the galaxy where the Syrians claimed all life comes from. That was the star seed connection. And it's called the homing pigeon theory in UFO circles. Okay? It's part of the ancient aliens, Nephilim breeding humans concept. The theory is that we go back to the center of the galaxy as the result of our apocalyptic transformation. It's kind of also like the 2001, 2010 movie series, where humans will become the four-dimensional space child, right? Star child. And then we're ready to join the galactic community as the star child. And etc., etc. This is all part of the ISIS joining the greater galactic community. And it's all tied up in a vast, series of unknowns at this point. To even speculate further is folly. And so back to us on Earth, and Plato. Plato has to prepare humanity so that he plants a hyperspace seed in the human mind, consisting of 5 main concepts which are almost predatory in their ability to successfully take over and plant a New World Order evolutionary strategy. Okay? The first concept is this idea of the forms. Okay? Plato introduces the idea that, for example, I'm sitting in a chair. How do I know it's a chair? Because it's an example of the idea of a chair. So, there's an idea with a capital I of chair in the collective preconscious. What Plato's talking about here is that there's a two-dimensional membrane that's separate. This is wild. And think about this. He's just sitting on a mountain somewhere in ancient Greece. How would he come up with all this? He must have been told. There's a two-dimensional membrane that separates the collective consciousness, the all-seeing eye, from the collective unconscious, which is the Gaia intelligence land of the dead meta landscape, okay? A two-dimensional membrane. And this membrane consists of ideas, concepts, a primary screen, and it's the classic holographic. Quantum physics talks about the holographic universe and how, let's say, you can look at it as the periodic table of elements is a two-dimensional screen, which contains a program. And the beam of light, which is energy, God, consciousness, the observer, whoever, penetrates the screen like a movie projector shining the light through a film. And the result is an unfolded four-dimensional landscape. And this four-dimensional landscape is what we inhabit as conscious beings, you see. And so Plato is talking about what you see when you look up from the four-dimensional landscape. You see this screen, essentially, which consists of all the ideas of that the collective consciousness draws out of the collective unconscious, you see. And it's like the collective consciousness is a laser beam that is a searchlight zooming in on the island of the dead, which is that unconscious land of the dead. And normally it's, you know, zooming in on the outer racetrack, which corresponds to linear time in the 26,000 year sense. And you can look at it, that searchlight as moving 1 second at a time along the linear time track. But that's only one ray of light coming from the big eye, you see. Ho, ho, ho. One special ray of light's coming right at you. And it's handing you the Ankh, you see. It's the Aten handing you the Ankh of life with your pattern on it. Your ideal. So this idea of the program, the idea, when you say in your vocabulary the word idea, say thank you to Plato. Because before that, we didn't even have the idea of an idea in our vocabulary. So chaotic and post-Conan we were. And so the idea is, think about linguistics, psycholinguistic programming, when you say a word like idea, how it structures essentially everything in your speech. Language is made up of ideas strung together in a bigger idea. You see? That's what Plato's first contribution is about. Thinking at the four-dimensional hyper level. This leads directly to his second and even more pervasive in terms of a mystery cult initiation. His second formula, which ironically leads to the homuncular house. And that is the metaphor of the cave. So let's get on the homuncular house, you can see. In Plato's analogy of the cave, which is inserted arbitrarily and seemingly without a reason in the Republic, which is a political manifesto that he wrote in homage to his mentor Socrates, he inserts his own mysterious idea of the cave in this political treatise as an example of how people are asleep and chained by concepts socially. Okay? The idea is that you're in the chair. See, normally, you know, it's just a human, let's say, form in the chair, chained into the chair, looking in one direction, because your chains hold your head looking in one direction. And that's the closed doors of the present, okay? And that's the normal present where you're totally just a slave to what you see and you're reacting to stimulus in the present. Materialistic existential terror. Chained. No idea that there's a world outside. And so Plato says, what if you actually break your chains and get up and realize that these projections on the wall are coming from a light source above that's hitting your consciousness in the chair, bouncing off an image of you interacting with these ideas that are essentially two-dimensional. If you can break out of that, then you can get out of the cave of the homuncular box and out into the real world, which for Plato is where the pyramid exists. Okay? And of course now, because it has such a clever propaganda interpretation, the propaganda is what's fed to you on the walls, you're chained by your obedience to society, you have to break free of the chains and get out into the light. That's the subversive, because it's like the idea that these mysteries that Plato gives you are layered, so you'll see whatever you're going to react to, and it has a political interpretation, but a much deeper, more important hyperspatial interpretation. But again, at that time, nobody's ready for the hyperspatial interpretation. Maybe a few Pythagorean cultists who are in the hills, maybe they're going to get it. But the mass of people are not. So he cloaks it in the political metaphor. But it becomes a pervasive thing that pops up now in our matrix culture. if I pulled out that DVD, Philosophy in the Matrix there, they talk about Plato's cave as the primary example of what the Matrix is about. The idea that you're in a chair, i.e. in the tank, being fed a virtual reality, which would be what's happening on the walls. And that the real world is something totally different. And that's returned suspiciously at the end of the Age of Pisces, right on cue according to Plato's program. The third idea that Plato gave us is the idea of Atlantis. In his dialogues, he is the first person to record the story of Atlantis, which again, given to us by who? Mysterious Egyptian priests passing on secret wisdom to his mentor's mentor, Solon, the most respected Greek in history. Okay? And the Atlantis myth, of course, is many things to us. It instantly reminds us now of the previous culture and how it failed. It instantly reminds us of how far they got, i.e. they didn't even get to the past the homuncular level before it all went to hell. And how even their vast technology going to the solar system, you know, transforming into energy, whatever they pulled off, they still blew it and were punished for it. And the reason that Plato mentions Atlantis, again, it's part of a political argument he's making in one of his dialogues, because living in ancient Greece as he did, ancient Greece being the first and only real democracy, is made up primarily of rich men arguing. And Plato learned at the feet of Socrates, who was the critic of the entire situation and made people think and stimulated them and kind of prodded them in terms of their assumptions. And this is what stirred Plato's spirit and set him on his path that led him to go to Egypt and be taught by the mystery cult in all of these esoteric concepts, which turn out to be very pervasive in our whole world. So that third concept anyway is Atlantis, the whole story of Atlantis, which, as we know now, becomes even more relevant because of the Atlantean connection and how the Atlantis connection is so misunderstood in our modern world, yet is so powerful and so potentially influential in many, many, many ways and needs to be really understood objectively. So, on the fourth concept is, of course, the Platonic year. Plato mysteriously, using the calendar of light, which of course is 6,000 years, so it gives you the example of 3 zodiac ages, and the whole, that's what you need to understand the whole cycle, is to look at the one arc maybe of the 3. Okay? He gives us the idea, and that's why it's called the Platonic months, of the zodiac ages, using the astronomy, watching the constellations change, the fact that they're 2,160 years in a loop, and that it's a big cosmic version of what we normally live out as the year. Of course, Plato gives no explanation for what this means, but it's curious that he gives it as well as Atlantis. I.e., if you put Atlantis together with the Platonic months, then you're going to understand other things like the Graham Hancock level ancient monument conspiracy. Because you need only those 2 concepts, both given by Plato, to understand the Hancock thesis of the star chart timetable 10,500 BC, how the monuments, when aligned to star constellations as they appeared at certain times in the sky, create a giveaway that shows how the people who built the pyramidal plains of Egypt were specifically quoting the 10,500 BC point. Why? Because they are the whole culture was planned by Atlantean survivors who, in the flood, had to record and honor that whole creation and exodus and their achievement of surviving and being the men to start over. So the 10,500 BC marker in Egypt and in other places is pointing see, the guy, it's so complex. The guys who built it, made the plan, let's say, and designed all these things, they're doing it primarily for their own glory and their own sense of accomplishment of having survived and being the man. Like Elendil, leaving the ruins of Numenor and creating Gondor. What does he create? He creates a 500-foot statue of himself, right? And so it's the idea of the Atlantean arrogance still is left over in this grandiose plans, and the large-scale architectural ego is an imprint which you see in all of Egyptian culture. The pharaoh huge, while the normal people are represented like toys. So that's the idea of the Nephilim, ancient astronaut. See, again, von Daniken's theory that they're ancient astronauts is actually the fact that they're Atlanteans, advanced Atlanteans. And Hancock himself is quick to denounce von Daniken on that basis correctly, saying that, look, the Egyptian and other monuments that are left behind clearly indicate because of the astronomy an Earth-based scheme. In other words, Plato's big calendar, which is revealed in the monumental alignments, is only viewable from Earth. So it makes no sense that aliens would give us monuments that show the view from our own Earth, you know. And so the idea is that there's a bigger picture that is revealed when you put those two concepts together. Finally, the last concept is the act of all of the four coming together. The act of your comprehension of the higher realm of ideas in conjunction with your understanding of the cave being your escape from linear time into the homuncular house. So you put together the world of ideas with the cave and you get the homuncular house. You put together Atlantis with the Zodiac months and you get the apocalyptic countdown timetable. Put all four of those together and you get what Plato calls anamnesis, the fifth gift, conceptually. What is anamnesis? It is remembering what you've forgotten, i.e. for you, that membrane disappears and you have access to all of the knowledge of the collective unconscious. But it starts particularly in relation to you and your own plot level, your own past lives, your life as an Atlantean, your life in the higher cosmic worlds. And so an anamnesis experience is when you've aligned all four of these concepts, particularly the first two, of ideas with the cave to create a homuncular effect. You get the anamnesis generated, and the anamnesis generates information which is only understandable in the context of the other two concepts, which is Atlantis and the Zodiac timeline. Because the Zodiac timeline explains reincarnation and why reincarnation occurs. This is why in Hindu mythology you're never going to understand the purpose of reincarnation, and they specifically say there is no purpose because their timetable is millions of years, and it's not about focusing on an apocalyptic marching to a conclusion. That's a Western concept. That's part of the Western scheme. That's what the calendar of light is all about. And so the idea then is that the combination of your own personal evolution, as the first two concepts reveal, with the Atlantean Zodiac timetable creates apocalyptic plot level, which you experience as the anamnesis contact. Your contact in Chapel Perilous with your guide. And here, normally, the Syrians are there to help you, okay? In one form or another, sending you information that you channel, or having a face-to-face. Or if not the Syrians, it's the dead. For me, it's been the dead more than the Syrians. Initially, during the New Occult era, in my late teens, early 20s, it was about the Syrians helping me, helping us, my cult. But now, in the last new, that's the old cosmic. In the new cosmic, it's been the dead, the glorious dead, Cleopatra, Joseph Smith, Carl Jung, etc. So, leading up to the ghost capital, finally. So, the idea now is that the Platonic concepts, anamnesis, is where it all comes together, and you find out what your specific destiny is. Again, destiny is part of the world of ideas homuncular combination. Why? Because the homuncular mechanism is your real body, but your destiny script. And here we can zoom out on this, right? And we look at this example. A CD, okay? Representing a disc, an idea, the primary pattern of who you are, whatever that may be, okay? Here's your homuncular house. The idea is that your pattern, with a capital P in the Zelazny sense. See, Zelazny's pattern is merely an application of Plato's world of ideas to a cosmic initiation scheme. Why? Because your pattern is like something that is downloaded and played on the top of your homuncular house. The light of your all-seeing eye absorbs this pattern, and it filters down through whatever ascension scheme connects. You see, the 7-leveled ascension connects the top and the bottom. The bottom is represented by the level where the homuncular cube is actually existing. So with the box closed, the keystone represents the bottom, the capstone represents the top, and the top and bottom of the ladder of 7 levels, as you see here. Okay? And Plato's world of ideas is also the world of initiatory astral plane ascension schemes. Okay? So you have to understand that essentially it's this. The hyperspatial homuncular house is the hardware. The world of ideas is the software. Whatever plot level, whatever program, personal or collective you insert, thanks to the disk into this mechanism, produces theatrical expressions, which are that plot level. And now I just want to get my ninja guy in here. My wonderful ninja guy can be in here representing now my interface with the Allah cosmic powers behind me. And it's the idea that my anamnesis is the homunculus. Okay? Because it starts off as the chair where my sluggish slave shadow self is imprisoned. And I wake up and destroy that old self through the process of understanding the ideas, the homuncular house, Atlantis, and the Zodiac timetable, leading to my apocalyptic anamnesis revelation. And now I'm reborn as my destiny self, and that's what the homunculus is. Right? And my God self, the me with all these cubes, it represents now these two characters, ironically enough, of the homunculus, standard homunculus, as I have already been using, with this new Allah God form, okay? Right? It's somehow having a relationship that's like a double-headed bird and represents the two sides of myself, let's say, cosmic and, personal cosmic here, collective cosmic here. Maybe this Allah God form, since in Muhammad's vision, it exists at the top of the tree, of the lote tree. In other words, Allah is like the Masonic G, and the lote tree is like the 7-leveled ascension. And this cubical 99-named structure is spinning almost like a star on a Christmas tree at the top. That's what Allah rests and reposes. And each human being has their own little gem hanging off a branch of the tree. And so my homuncular man is the representation of my branch being severed from the tree, right? That's what the whole escaping the chair is. Severing yourself from the false collective imprisonment, the Philip K. Dick black iron prison, and escaping, doing the magical operation, transform, change into the Superman. And now it's a new Hyperman who returns and can confront the God being on your own terms. So what happens is that as a result of your personal unconscious cosmic coming together in the form of the homunculus via the anamnesis, you are now able to take the God formula of the Allah, the collective God, collective cosmic. This exists, you see, at the top of the mountain in the land of the dead, the world of the ideas. You take that and you can use it as a battery plan for your own cube structure, which is pyramidal by default, but actually could exist and does exist as anything. We'll get to that memory palace windows concept shortly. But the idea is that this Allah form represents your own personal island, let's say. Your homuncular house can be the seed, let's say, which hyperspatially can create your own island, which is what the Joseph Smith Kolob mythology is all about. And I'll get all into that in my dialogue talking about Brother Smith. But I'm just going to close on that thought again. The Janus face of the two selves, okay? And I have my totally posable ninja guy, so I can do this. Look, he's doing a split, because he's so much the man. My two selves existing in cosmic collaboration are a Janus face, the two sides to me, my homuncular hyperspace body, my consciousness, essentially, and the Allah super scheme, my God self. Those are my two heads. And what a wonderful thing it is to be me. And so, closing now on Plato's concepts, we must thank him for his clear transmission of the calendar of light's agenda, which is to create all of this. Of course, now I'm the only person at this time who understands all this. Totally. You, my love, are understanding more than anyone else. But still, I'm the only one that gets all of it. So this record, this structure being built, all of it's essential to convey the message no matter what, because at the moment, the power of all the potential that all of this is going to generate is pulsing through the floppy head. And oh, what a wonderful explosion awaits the world. And that will be all. All hail Abraxas Isis.